Have you ever wondered how a monarchy that's been around for 2,500 years, a monarchy at the absolute peak of its power and wealth, can just completely collapse? Well, today we're going to dive into the dramatic 50-year story of Iran's very last royal dynasty to find out. So, I want you to just picture this for a second. It's 1971. Iran is throwing this massive party celebrating 2.5 millennia of monarchy. The country is just brimming with energy. It's exploding with new development. The capital, Tehran, is this thriving modern hub. Seriously, it looks like a nation that's absolutely unstoppable.
Which brings us to the big question, right? Why? How did all of that promise, all that power, just go up in flames in less than 10 years? To figure out how it all fell apart, we've got to go back to the very beginning. Our story starts with an ancient nation trying to reinvent itself, the rise of the Pahlavi dynasty. The story of modern Iran really kicks off with one guy, Reza Khan. In 1921, he leads a military coup and overthrows what was, by all accounts, a pretty weak and unstable government. Just 4 years later, the Iranian parliament, the Majlis, elects him as the new Shah, and by 1928, a whole new era of modernization was in full swing. Now, his mission was deeply personal, shaped by a long and painful history of foreign interference. Reza Shah had two main goals. Number one, build a powerful army so Iran could defend itself, and number two, cancel all those foreign concessions that gave countries like Britain and Russia control over Iran's resources. He was determined to build a truly independent Iran.
But that dream of total sovereignty, well, it was about to hit a massive wall. The nation suddenly found itself with a throne stuck under a foreign shadow, because the great powers of the world were about to intervene in a big way.
World War II breaks out. Iran declares itself neutral, but that doesn't matter. In August 1941, the country is invaded without any warning. In a total violation of international law, the British attack from the south, bombing the Iranian fleet and killing a lot of people.
And get this, at the exact same time, the Soviets invade from the north. The entire country is literally squeezed between two global superpowers. And the army that Reza Shah had built, his great project of sovereignty, it was just completely overwhelmed.
The result of this invasion was a huge turning point. Reza Shah, the founder of the dynasty, is forced to give up his throne and is sent into exile. And who takes his place? His young son, Mohammad Reza, who now has to rule a nation under foreign occupation.
Okay, so after the war, the foreign troops finally pack up and leave. But the struggle for who really controlled Iran's destiny, that was far from over. A whole new fight was just getting started. The battle for Iran's oil. A fight for the nation's wealth. At the heart of this whole conflict was something called the oil concession. Basically, it was a 60-year deal that gave a British company total control over Iran's massive oil reserves. And here's the kicker. The British were getting the lion's share of the profits, not Iran. As you can imagine, this made people furious, and it all boiled over in what's known as the Mossadegh crisis. So first, you have the popular Prime Minister, Mossadegh, who stands up and nationalizes the entire oil industry. Britain hits back with a crippling blockade. The Shah, thinking this is all a disaster, tries to fire Mossadegh, but that backfires. Mossadegh's supporters flood the streets, and they actually force the Shah to flee the country. For a minute, it really looks like the monarchy is done for. But then, a counter-movement, backed by the military, turns the tide and brings the Shah back to power. So, with his main rival now out of the picture and a new oil deal in his pocket, the Shah enters this period of incredible, absolute power. And this is where he makes his most ambitious gamble, to build a modern empire on a foundation of oil and weapons. And what made all this possible? The 1970s oil boom. All of a sudden, a massive torrent of cash floods into the country, giving the Shah the money to fund his grand vision for Iran on a scale you can hardly imagine. So, where did all that money go? Well, he bought the absolute latest weapons for his military. He built huge steel mills and car factories. His empress was put in charge of promoting art and culture. He even started buying up stakes in huge international companies like Mercedes. The whole point was to project this image of incredible power, with a flashy court and an unbeatable military. And this really gets to the core of his entire strategy and, his ultimate downfall. As one person said at the time, the Shah thought that he had bought security through his weapons and through his police, through SAVAK. Remember, he'd watched his father's army just crumble. So for him, real power came from modern, secular things you could see and touch. But here's the thing. There was another kind of power in Iran. Something older, something more deeply rooted. And that brings us to our final section, a revolution that came from the mosque.
This was the one power the Shah just could not defeat. You really had these two forces competing for the soul of the nation. On one side, you've got the Shah's power, his modern army, his notorious secret police, Savak, all that oil money, and his powerful international allies. But on the other side, you have the power of the mosque. We're talking about a deep-rooted faith, a connection to the poor and oppressed, and respect for national tradition. And maybe most importantly, it had become the only place left for people to voice their dissent.
And that right there, that is the absolute key to understanding the revolution. For millions of people who felt left behind or crushed by the regime, the mosque was the only place they could go to express themselves. Every single grievance from every corner of society got funneled into this one single institution.
And that leads you to a really stark and unavoidable conclusion. Against the mosque, the Shah was basically powerless. His tanks, his spies, his billions of dollars, none of it could touch this fundamental source of authority.
And the final moments are just so dramatic. You see portraits of the Shah going up in flames. In a way, the Shah himself has gone up in flames. He's been driven out of his own country, and he's never coming back.
And all of this leaves us with this one massive question, one that goes way beyond just Iran. How can a leader, armed with all the money in the world and the most modern weapons, become so utterly powerless against an idea?